Okay, people, back after a quick coffee, and we're just going to continue straight back on it with the serpent faith. So we've already done 3 serpent faiths and the idol worship, and I realised looking back at my readings, my video titles, that I'll probably put the name of the chapters that I've read on the end of the titles as well, instead of part 1, part 2, part 3. I'll put for instance, the last one was more about the Tuatha tribes, idol worship, and serpent faiths. And I'll probably put that in the title. So if you want to research a certain subject, you can go to that particular chapter. Anyway, I was just thinking that as I was having my coffee. Right, people, hope you are all good. Like I said, I've read this for a few hours now, so check back on my other streams. Anyway, right back to it. Serpent Faith 4. Rude carvings of snakes adorn the pyramidical stones overlooking the plains of Dundalk and Louth County. This is on Killing Hill, the marvellous megalithic temple of Newgrange. One of the finest antiquities of Ireland had its curled serpentine monument. The legend still floating about among the peasantry of the country parts of Ireland have frequent reference to the piatha worm or serpent. This creature is always in some lake or deep pond. The Fenian heroes are recorded in ancient songs to have killed many of them. And that reminds me Conan the Barbarian with the big snake. And that's what I realised, that Conan was based on old Celtic mythology with Crom, because Conan the Barbarian, he mentions Crom quite a lot, and there's a lot of snake and serpent worship in Conan the Barbarian, if you watch it. This creature is always in some lake or deep pond. The Fenian heroes recorded in ancient songs have killed many of them. Fionn, in particular, was a traditional dragon killer of Ireland. Of one monster in a lake, it's said, it resembled a great mound. Its jaws were yawning wide. There might lie concealed through its fury 100 champions in its eye pits. Taller in height than 8 men was its tail, which was erect above its back. Thicker was the most slender part of its tail than the forest oak which sunk by the flood. Fionn was inquisitive as to the country from which the reptile had come, and what was the occasion of the visit to Erin. He answered, from Greece to demand battle from the Fenians. It seems that it had already swallowed up a number of Fenian warriors and finished by gulping down Fionn. But the hero cleverly opened the side of the piast and released himself and the imprisoned men, and then killed it. After the poet added, of all the piasts that fell by Fionn, the number never can be told. Fionn elsewhere figures in the chase of Slea after one in Low Clan. We found a serpent in that lake. His being there was so gain to us. On looking at it as we approached, its head was larger than a hill, larger than any tree in the forest, were its tusks of the ugliest shape. Wider than the portals of the city were the ears of the serpent as we approached. He destroyed serpents in Lough Killen, Lough Nia, Lough Ria, as well as a blue serpent of Erin, and one at Howth. He killed 2 at Glenny Inny, one in the Murmuring Ban, another at Lough Cara, and beheaded a fearful creature which cast fire at him from Lough Leary. Fionn banished from the rafts each serpent he went to meet. Another poet left this version. A serpent there was in the lough of the mountain which caused the slaughter of the Fianna. 200 or more it put to death in one day. It demanded a ration of 50 horses a day for meals. Croker, in his Legend of the Lakes, gives a modern allusion to the myth, which relates to Lough Kitane of Killarney. A boy is asked, did you ever hear of a big worm in the lake? The worm is it? Fakes then. Sure enough, there is a big worm in the lake. How large is it? Why, then, it's as big as a horse and has a great mane upon it, so it has. Did you ever see it? No, myself never seed the serpent, but it's all one, for sure. Pedrag a Finin did. There is in Wexford County a Lough na Piatha O'Flaherty calls one, known in Lough Mask, the Irish crocodile. No one would dream of bathing in the lake of Glendalough of the Seven Churches, as a fearful monster lived there. There was a Lig na Pest in Derry. The present Knock na Bast was formerly Knock na Piast in Roscommon, near Donegal in Lim Pest, as well of Kilkenny is Toburn Piesta. A Piast was seen in Kilconny of Kerry. So this Piast is a large worm or snake-like creature that lives in the water. Some names have been changed more recently as Lough na Dabel or Lake of the Devil. The dragon of Wantley in Yorkshire was winged and had 44 iron teeth, with a sting in its tail as long as a flail, says an old ballad. Scotland, as the author of its sculpture stone shows, furnished a number of illustrations of the like Draculatria. Among the score of megalithic serpent Scotch monuments, some have crosses as well. There is also the well-known earthen serpent of Glen Fiochan, Loch Nell, near Oban, in view of the triple cone of Ben Cruachan, being 300 feet long and 20 high. Professor Blackie noted it thus: "Why lies the mighty serpent here? Let him who knoweth tell, with its head to the land and its huge tail near the shore of fair Loch Nell. Why it lies here, not here alone, but far to the east and west, the wonder-working snake is known, a mighty god confessed. And here the mighty god was known in Europe's early morn, in view of Cruachan's temple, triple cone, before John Bull was born. And worship new on Celtic ground with trumpets, drum, and bugles, before a trace in Lorn was found of Campbells and MacDougals. And here the serpent lies in pride, his hoary tail to tell, and rears his mighty head beside the shore of fair Loch Nell." Visitors to Argyllshire and to Ireland cannot fail to recognise this old-time symbol. The mound on the Clyde in Argyllshire is the head remains of a serpent earthwork. A lithic temple in serpentine form is seen in the west of Bute. Some connect the cup and disc superstition with this worship. Forlong, however, thinks of a relationship in the spectacle ornament with the phallic, though one form of inscription is decidedly draconic. Serpent stones put into water were, until lately, used in the Hebrides to cure diseased cattle. The great serpent mound of the north at Ac na Gol near Inveraray was opened by Mr. Skene. Serpent worship was common in Argyll, as that part of Scotland was Irish by consanguinity and racial descent. Keating tells us that the Gedal, derived from Gedalius, got the name of glass or green from the green spot on his neck caused by the bite of the serpent in the days of Moses. South Britain can still exhibit vestiges of serpent worship. Among English fonts bearing reminiscences are those of Stokes Golding, Appleton, Fitzwarren, Tintagel, East Haddon, Locking in Somerset, and Avebury. The three first represent George and the Dragon, or rather Horus of Egypt, piercing the monster. In the last case, the serpent's tail is round the font. The vicar of Avebury remarks, "On the ancient Norman font in Avebury Church there is a mutilated figure, dressed apparently in a druidical priestly garb, holding a crozier in one hand and clasping an open book to his breast with the other. Two winged dragons or serpents are attacking this figure on either side. May not this be designed to represent the triumph of Christianity over Druidism, in which there was much veneration entertained for this serpent and serpent worship?" An interview with the late Archdruid of Wales, a man full of curious learning and traditional lore, The writer heard much of serpent adoration in ancient Britain. Whatever the race or races might have been, the mystic creature had friends in the British Isles, though chiefly in Ireland. Long ago, Bryant's mythology taught that the chief deity in the Gentile world was almost universally worshipped under the form of the serpent. Serpent faith number 5. How you doing, Epic? Nice to see you, buddy. Serpent has to mean something we're not understanding. I think serpent means the old religion. Right. Serpent faith number 5. A rapid glance may be taken over fields, ancient and modern, illustrating human respect for the serpent. This devotion is not confined to the old world, being found in the new. It is not limited by time, ranging over all periods. It is not peculiar to any race or colour. Aboriginal races, so called, have from remote antiquity honoured the serpent. All over Africa, the vast regions of Tartary and China, the hills and plains of India, the whole extent of America, the isles of the Pacific, alike in sweltering tropics and icebound coasts, is the same tale told. Civilized man, whether beside the Nile, the Euphrates, or the Indus, or the deserts of Arabia, the highlands of Persia, the plains of Syria, or the islands of Greece, among the tribes of Canaan, the many named peoples of Asia Minor, the philosophers of Athens and Alexandria, the mariners of Phoenicia, or the warriors of Rome, bowed to the serpent god. All religions, past and present, recognize the creature. The Reverend Dr. De Aramo in The Serpent of Eden sees direct serpent worship in the worship of the serpent as a god in himself and for his own sake, but indirect worship in the use and veneration of the serpent not for himself but merely as a symbol or emblem of some one or more of the gods. He esteems the Egyptians indirect worshippers. The Greeks had it as a symbol of Apollo, Minerva, and Juno. The Ophites of early Christendom saw it in a symbol of Christ or the mundane soul. The creature spoke from under the tripod of Delphi. It moved about the holy bread on the altar of the Gnostics. It was a living and moving symbol in Egypt. It had a place of honor in the temples of Tyre, Cyprus, Babylon, and India. It crawled in the sacred cave of Tryphonius, and its eyes glistened within the shadows of Elephanta. As the Apophis, pierced by the god Horus, and as the emblem of Typhon, it was the evil spirit of Egypt, but in the Uraeus of Osiris, it was a good one. The Egyptian faith, several thousand years before Christ, also included serpent worship. The serpent symbol distinguished Sabiaism. It was in Egypt the illustration of a new birth, as it cast its skin, and thence gave to man a hope of the resurrection. In the Book of the Dead and other Egyptian scriptures, it is frequently mentioned. The great serpent on human legs was a solemn mystery. The Agatha daemon was the guardian of the dead. Flinders Petrie, in 10 Years Digging in Egypt, when referring to the fact that the oldest pyramid, Medum, was erected on the principle of the mastaba or tomb, declared that in the architecture of that very ancient structure, there was the cornice of Uraeus serpents, which is familiar in later times. This points to an era of perhaps 7,000 years ago. The neighbouring Assyrians paid no less devotion to it. It is known that in the land of Canaan there was the Ophiolatria, as the Hebrew scriptures testify. Cyprus and Rhodes, not less than all Phoenicia, abounded in it. Christianity was early affected by it in Gnosticism. Epiphanius relates that the Gnostics kept a tame serpent in Cista or sacred ark, and when celebrating their mysteries, the Eucharist, piled loaves on a table before it, and then invoked the serpent to come forth. The Ophites, serpent worshippers, were derived from the Gnostics. The Chinese for the lunar period represents a serpent. The word for an hour, se, is a symbol of the serpent. The dragon still presides in China, Persia, which supplanted Assyria, occupied thence much of its serpent ideas. So did the Semitic conquerors of Babylonia at an earlier period receive their theology and letters from the Akkadians. The Zendavesta, three-headed serpent, had to yield to the sun god. Ahi, the great serpent, was in opposition to the Zoroastrian deities. Bel and the dragon have had a fixed place in Oriental literature. Bel and the serpent may still be discerned in excavated Pompeii. Clemens Alexandrinus remarked, if we pay attention to the strict sense of the Hebrew, the name Evia, Eve, aspirated, signifies a female serpent. India, however, is down to our time the high seat of Ophilantria. The Maruts, Rudras, and Pitris are esteemed fiery dragons of wisdom, as magicians and druids were of old. Abulfaz states that there are 700 localities where carved figures of snakes are objects of adoration. There are tribes in the Punjab that will not kill a snake. Vishnu is associated with the reptile in various ways. Sesha, the serpent king with 100 heads, holds up the earth. The Nagas are given up to this peculiar worship. The Buddhist poem Nagananda relates the contest between Garuda, king of the birds, and the prince of the Naga or snake deities. India beyond the Ganges has, as in Cambodia, magnificent temples in its honour. The soul of a tree in Siam may appear as a serpent. In every ancient language, writes Madame Blavatsky, the word dragon signifies what is now does in Chinese, i.e., the being who excels in intelligence. The brazen serpent is in the East the divine healer. Asclepius cannot do without his serpent. In the hell of the Persians, says Hyde, the snake ascends in the vast rolls from this dark gulf, and the inside is full of scorpions and serpents. In the poem Voluspa of the Edda we read, I know there is Nastandi, hell, an abode remote from the sun, the gates of which look towards the north. It is built of the carcasses of serpents. The ancient Greeks borrowed their serpent notions from older lands through the medium of Phoenician traders. Hesiod's monster, the echidna, was a half-speckled serpent, terrible and vast. The Atmedon of Constantinople showed three brazen serpents intertwined, was said to have been taken by the Greeks from the Persians at Plataea. Apollo, the Greek Horus, fights the python of darkness as a sun god should do, but owns a serpent symbol. Euripides notes that in processions, the fire-born serpent leads the way. Etruria, of which Rome was a colony, probably borrowed its serpent worship from Egypt. It was there, as elsewhere, a form of sun worship, as the reptile hibernates to renew its strength and casts off its slough to renew its youth, as the sun is renewed at spring. And yet Ruskin says, the true worship must have taken a dark form when associated with the draconian one. Africa is well known to be still under the cruel bondage of serpent worship and that of the evil Apophis kind. The Negro's forefathers appeared to him as serpents. Over the Pacific Ocean, the serpent carved in stone was adored. Tales in Fiji Isles spoke of a monster dragon dwelling in a cave. Samoa had a serpent from the god Dengi. Even in Australia, though in ruder style, the serpent was associated, as in Oceania, with some idea of a creator. America astonished Spaniards of the 16th century with the parody of their own faith. The civilized Aztecs and Peruvians adored serpents. Huitzilopochtli of Mexico held, like Osiris, a serpent staff. Kihuacoatzicoatl wife of the Great Father, was an immense serpent. The name of the goddess, Kihuakatal, means the female serpent. But the wilder North American Indians bowed to the serpent, as may be known from Squire's serpent symbol, a serpentine earthwork in Adams County, Ohio, upon a hill, is 1,000 foot in length. Mounds in Iowa, arranged in serpentine form, extended over 2 miles. A coiled serpent mound by St. Peter's River, Iowa, is 2,310 feet long. In the deserts of Colorado have been reported lately the remains of a temple. It is said that the capitals for the 2 remaining pillars are stone serpents' heads. The feet of the columns look like rattlesnakes. The pillars seem to be rattlesnakes standing on their tails. That's interesting. I'll need to look further into these American temples, serpent temples. Pretty cool. Never heard of them. Europe was, doubtless, indebted to travelling dragons of wisdom for this mystic lore. How, or under what circumstances, we know not. Well, maybe it started in Europe and spread. But they always seem to think it always came from the Middle East or Egypt or this serpent stuff. They can't actually get in their head that maybe it went the other way as well. Right. Whether the older and long passed away races were thus learned is a question, but that peoples far removed from our era, or but survivals of remoter tribes, were acquainted with it may be believed, if only from our serpentine mounds or piles of stones in serpent form. Rome carried forth the serpent in war, since one of its standards was a serpent on a pole. Long after, in the church processions on Palm Sunday, the serpent figured mounted on a pole. Scandinavia had its Midgard encircling the globe with its body. The Norse serpent, Jormungandr, had a giantess for a mother and the evil Loki for a father. Muscovites and Lithuanians had serpent gods, while Livonia bowed to the dragon. Olaus Magnus records serpents being kept in sacred buildings of the north and fed on milk. Thor was able to kill a serpentine embodiment of evil by striking it with his tau or hammer. In pagan Russia, the serpent was the protector of brides. Saint Hilarion of Ragusa got rid of the dangerous snake by Boas by lighting a great fire and commanding the reptile to go on top to be burnt. One of the symbols of both Hercules and the Celtic Hu was a serpent. The German white serpent gave wisdom to the eater of it. Cool. In Gaul, it was reverenced. Nathair was a serpent god. Priests, druidical or otherwise, had a caduceus of 2 serpents embracing one another. A Gaulish goddess had, in like manner, 2 snakes about his legs and body. Druids kept live serpents for pious purposes. A French writer notices one twisted around a lingam, as can be seen now, also in Pompeii. Gaulish coins represent a serpent under or over a horse, the sun emblem. As the Quran informs us, Eblis was brought to Eden in the mouth of the serpent. The Pythia, or serpent of Delphi, was a priestess. Snake offerings were made to Bacchus. The phallic character is exhibited in the serpent at Mayence, with the apple of love in its mouth, upon which the creature, the virgin, is represented as treading. France was not without its snake destroyers. In Brittany, Saint Suliac, watching the emergence of a great serpent from its cave, put his stole round its neck and cast it into the sea. Up to 1793, a procession of the clergy of Saint Suliac annually took place when a silver cross was lowered into the serpent cavern of La Gouvre. M. Abbott tells of a serpentine dance he witnessed in Greece. A number of women and children formed the tail of a serpent, which incessantly revolved round itself, without the extremities ever joining. In ancient ornaments, an egg is seen with a serpent coiled round it, as to fertilise it. All readers of Welsh Druidism are aware of the part played therein by this creeping creature. It was the Celtic dragon Dreg. It was the gliding god. Cerdwen is associated with a car and serpent. Ebery gives us the serpent of the sun. The Glain Nieder or serpent's egg was a mystery, a great mystery of the Druids. Serpent worship has been taken up to the heavens, where constellations have been named after the creeping, silent creature. There is Hydra, killed by Hercules, but not till it had poisoned him by its venom. There are voluminous folds of Draco. There is that one held by Ophiuchus, which sought to devour the child of Virgo. There is the seven-headed Draco, each head forming a star in the little bear. Thus we may exclaim with Herschel, the heavens are scribbled over with innumerable snakes. Classical mythology tells of a python which sought to devour the offspring of Latona, whose child Apollo became the eternal foe of the would-be destroyer. Jupiter himself became a dragon to deceive Proserpine. Minerva carried a serpent on her breast. Medusa bore snakes for curls on her hair. What is the meaning of it all? Bethel mentions the fact that the Celtic words for a serpent is expressive of its wisdom. The same meaning is in other languages and legends that are of various nations. A knowing man, one versed in the mysteries, was called a serpent. Was it the silence which distinguished it in the animal creation that brought this reputation and made it a fitting emblem of the esoteric system? It was a symbol of productive energy and was ever associated with the egg, symbol of the progressive elements of nature. The male was a great father, the female the great mother. O'Brien and others see a close connection between solar, phallic and serpent worship. The author of the Round Towers of Ireland saying, if all these be identical, where is the occasion of a surprise at our meeting? The sun, phallus and serpent, the constituent symbols of each occurring in combination embossed upon the same table and grouped under the same architrave. The connection of the serpent with the starry host has been observed. Its scales resemble revolving stars. Like them, it moves swiftly but noiselessly. The zodiacal girdle appeared like a serpent devouring in its own tail, and it was always deemed of a fiery nature. Some have supposed the stories of monstrous reptiles, the object of dread and conflict, to have originated from traditional records of gigantic and fearful-looking saurians or serpents that once lived on Earth, and some lingering specimens of which might have been seen by early tribes of mankind. The Atlantosaurus immanis was 100 feet long, with a femur 2 yards in diameter. The Atlantosaurus immanis was 100 feet long, with a femur 2 yards. The serpent was certainly the token or symbol of an ancient race, celebrated for wisdom, giving rise to the naming of the learned after dragons or serpents. The Druid of the Welsh Triads exclaims, "I am a serpent." According to J.H. Baker, the 3, 5, 7 or 9-headed snake is a totem of a race of rulers who presided over the Aryan Hindus. The snake race was that of the first primeval seafarers. The fair and wise serpent race became, at the earliest stage of tradition, rulers and civilizers. And Ovid sang, as an old serpent casts his scaly vests, reaves in the sun in youthful glory dressed, so when Alcides mortal mould resigned, his better part enlarged and grew refined. Sounds a bit like an innuendo. Serpent Faith 6. Have a quick look at the StreamYard. It's depicted everywhere. The seraphim, the highest choir of angels, means fiery serpent. The office were the elites of the Roman secret societies. I love that Ohio mound. You'll need. Do you know what, Epic? We'll need to do is I'll need to read this book, and then we'll try and get some points, some chapters, and we'll try and speak about it on a hangout. If you want, man, you can come up and have some opinions and some views on what's going on here. I might do that actually. Like when I finish the book, like do a stream and we can talk about the book and the points in it. But there's definitely some interesting stuff there. Little nuggets, right? It must be remembered that even traditions bear testimony to a variety of races in the island. The Celts were among the later visitors, coming certainly after the Iberian, whose type remains in the southwest Ireland. One of these early tribes brought the knowledge from afar, or, what may rather be conjectured, some shipman from the east found a temporary sojourn there. Dr. Fenney justly remarks, the absence of such reptiles in Ireland is remarkable, but their absence could certainly not have originated a serpent worship through terror. While everything artistic or religious in old Irish designs, from the wonderful illuminations in the Book of Kells to the old Celtic gold ornaments, represents the serpent and indicate, therefore, some very strong religious idea being always uppermost in connection with it. A cypress amulet gives a goddess, nude and winged, having serpents for legs. A typhon has been seen with its extremities, two twisted snakes. A Buddha has been indicated with two twisted snakes for appendages. The Greek poet also describes the divine stubborn-hearted Echidna, mother of Cerberus, half nymph with dark eyes and fair cheeks, and half a serpent. The mother of an ancient Scythian hero was a serpent maiden. A story was told in 1520 of a Swiss man being in an enchanted cave and meeting with a beautiful woman whose lower part was a serpent and who tempted him to kiss her. As recently reported from France, a lady has there a familiar in the form of a serpent, able to answer her questions and cleverly writing down replies with the point of its tail. There is no saying how this marvellous creature may enter into future theological controversies. A book published in the reign of Charles I had this story. Ireland, since its first inhabitation, was pestered with a triple plague, to wit, with great abundance of venomous beasts, copious store of deals visibly appearing, and infinite multitudes of magicians. The saints' share in the trouble is thus described. Patrick taking the staff or wand of Jesus with his sacred hand, and elevating it after threatening manner, as also by the favourable assistance of angels, he gathered together in one place all the venomous beasts that were in Ireland, and after he drew them up before him to a most high mountain, hung over the sea, called then Cruach and Alg, and now Cruach Pedrag, that is St. Patrick's Mountain, and from thence he cast them down in that steep precipice to be swallowed up by the sea. The Druids or Tuaths, or other troublers, fared nearly as badly as the snakes, as the author affirmed. Of the magicians, he converted and reclaimed very many, and such as persisted incorrigible. He rooted them out from the face of the earth. From the Book of Leinster we gather the intelligence that the three serpents were found in the heart of Meki, son of the great queen. After they had been killed by Diancecht, their bodies were burnt, and the ashes were thrown into the river Barrow, which so boiled that it dissolved every animal in it. As tradition avows, St. Kevin, when he killed one of the remaining serpents, threw the creature into the lake at Glendalough, which got the name of Loch na Piast, or Serpent Loch. Among the sculptures on the impost mouldings at Glendalough is one of a dog devouring a serpent. Snake stones have been found, consisting of small rings of glass. The ammonite fossil is known as the snake stone. Wendell of Kilkenny shows the persistence of ancient ideas in the wilder parts of Ireland. Even as late as the 11th century, says he, we have evidence of the prevalence of the old religion in the remoter districts than many of the islands on our western coasts. Many of the secondary doctrines of Druidism hold their ground at this very day as articles of faith. Connected with these practices, Beltane, etc., is a vivid memory still retained of one once universal ophilatria or serpent worship, and the attributing of supernatural powers and virtues to particular animals, such as a bull, the white and red cow, the boar, the horse, the dog, etc., the memory of which has been perpetuated in our topographical denominations. The Irish early Christians long continued the custom of entwining their old serpent god around the cross. One has said the ancient Irish crosses are alive with serpents. The green god snake was Gadael Glass. The word Turda Glass meant the tower of the green god. The old Milesian standard of a snake twisted round a rod may seem to indicate a phallic connection with a sab. The Book of Lismore asserts the same distinguished power of serpent expulsion on behalf of St. Columba, as others have done for St. Patrick, or any other saint, saying, Then he turned his face westwards and said, May the Lord bless the island with its indwellers, and he banished toads and snakes out of it. Thus have we seen that Ireland, above most countries on earth, retained a vivid conception of ancient serpent worship, though some of the myths were naturally and gratefully associated with the reputed founders of a purer faith. Search where we will, says Kennersley Lewis, the nuptial tree round which coils the serpent is connected with time and with life as a necessary condition, and with knowledge, the knowledge of a scientific priesthood, inheriting records and traditions hoary, perhaps, with the snows of a glacial epoch. So, guys, that's the end of the serpent stuff. There was quite a lot there, the serpent chapters. So, Epic's saying, wasn't Grendel's mom a serpent? I dig it. Right, man. Back to the... Right, we've got the sun worship. Whatever the earlier savage races may have thought of religion, if they thought at all about it, those who came after, with more or less touch of civilization, were led in Ireland as elsewhere to contemplate deity in the sun. Sun worship may have been superseded other and grosser forms of nature worship. Stuart Glennie has well expressed our thoughts thus. We should be quite unable truly to understand how the central myths and poses originated if we cannot, in some degree at least, realize the wonder with which men saw the daily and yearly renewed sublime spectacle of the birth, the life course, and the death of the life and light-giving Creator actually visible in the heavens, a wonder of eternal rebirth. Dr. Tyler has reason when saying, in early philosophy throughout the world, the sun and moon were alive and, as it were, human in their nature. Professor Rees refers to the tendency of the savage to endow the sun, moon, and the sky, or any feature of the physical world, admitting of being readily acknowledged with a soul and a body, with parts and passion like their own. In all ages, in all climes, and in all nations, the sun, under various names and symbols, was regarded as the creator and as a sustainer of all things. Egypt, the primeval seat of learning, was a high seat of sun adoration. The Sphinx, with the face to the east, represents Harmachis, young Horus, or the rising sun. The orb is Osiris, the ruling god of day. In it, descent, it is the dying deity, going below to the land of shades, but only to be resurrected as the victorious Horus, piercing the head of the dragon of darkness. Twice a year did the bright rays enter the great hall of the Nile temple to fall straight upon the shrine. The ancient Persian bowed to the Mithra as the sun, For it was said, "May he come to us for protection, for joy, for mercy, for healing, for victory, for hallowing. Mithra will I honour with offerings, will I draw near to us, a friend with prayer." The Assyrians, the Akkadians, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Romans, all alike worshipped the sun, as Marduk, Baal, Apollo, or Adonis. Rabbi Isaki reads Tammuz of Ezek, chapter 7, 5, 6, 8, chapter 8, as the burning one, i.e. Moloch. India has down to this day reverenced the sun. Its Vedic names grew into some sort of active personality. We can follow, writes Max Muller, in the Vedic hymns step by step the development which changes the sun from a mere luminary into a creator, preserver, ruler. As the sun sees everything and knows everything, he is asked to forgive and forget what he alone has seen and knows. He may be Indra, Varuna, Savriti, or Dios, the shining one. What to us is poetry was in India prose. Even in Homer, Hyperion, the sun god, was the father of all gods. According to Plato, Zupater, or Jupiter, was the father of life. Minerva, or Pallas, the early dawn, sprang from the head of Jove every morning, fully armed, to fight the clouds of darkness. Balder, the white god or sun, was killed, said our Norsemen and Saxon forefathers, by an arrow from the blind Hodor, or night. Africa has in all time been a centre of sun worship. The Spaniards found the cult both in Mexico and Peru. And it's funny there, the Balder, the white god or sun, was killed, said our Norsemen and Saxon forefathers, by an arrow from the blind Hodor, or night. Sun customs. So we've got 15 minutes. 15 minutes and I'll call it a night at that, and hopefully it'll be one or two more readings after that and we'll be done. So this is sun rituals. There are survivals of the worship and the custom and languages of Europe up to this century. A singular ceremony took place in the Church of the Carmine, Naples, attended by civic officials in procession. The day after Christmas Day, when the new sun of the year began, then first to move in position, there was a solemn cutting of the hair of an image, symbol of the sun's rays, as in the old heathen times. A Scotch dance, the reel, still keeps up the memory of the old Celtic circular dance. There is also the Desol, or practice of turning sun rays to bless the sun. This was from far right to left, as with dancing dervishes now, or the old Bacchic dance from east to west. Plautus wrote, "When you worship the gods, do it turning to the right hand." Poseidonus, the Stoic, referred to the Celts, said, "At their feasts the servant carries round the wine from right to left. Thus they worship their gods turning to the right." The Highland mother with a choking child cries out, "De Sioule, the way of the south." A De Sioule Sunday is still kept up in Brittany. A stone was dug up in the road from Glasgow to Edinburgh, on which an inscription to Granius, the Latin form of Grian, the sun. Enclosures in the Highlands were called Grianan, the house of the sun. On Harris Island, in a stone circle with a stone in the centre, known as Clach na Green, the stone of the sun. At Elgin, the bride had to lead her husband to church, following the sun's course. But did the Irish indulge in this form of idolatry? Some writers, zealous for the honour of their countrymen, have denied the impeachment. Even the learned O'Curry was of that school, declaring, "There is no ground whatever for imputing to them human sacrifice, none whatever for believing that the early people of Erin adored the sun, moon, or stars, nor that they worshipped fire." But what was St. Patrick teaching? The saint is recorded to have said of the sun, "All who adore him shall unhappily fall into eternal punishment." In his confessio, he exclaimed, "Woe to its unhappy worshippers, for punishment awaits them, but we believe in and adore the true Son, Christ." Morian, the modern enthusiastic Welsh bard, is equally desirous to remove from his sires the reproach of being sun worshippers. One of the Welsh names of the sun, he remarks, proves that they believed in a personal God and that they believed he dwelt in the sun. That name of the sun is Juan, the abode of Hu, the deity. Elsewhere he writes, there was no such a being as a sun god in the religious system of the Druids. They named the sun the house of God, Juan Aned Hu. Again, the Gwyddor, high priest, was emblematical of the spirit of the god in the sun. The Gwyddon was clad in a robe of virgin white, symbolizing light and holiness. His 12 disciples, representing the 12 constellations, formed the earthly zodiac. They too were robed in white. Morian is the ablest living advocate of Welsh Druidism, but his views on that subject are somewhat governed by his extensive reading, his love of symbolism, and his poetic temperament. St. Patrick gives, according to an Erse poem, no such credit to the Irish, crying out, "O blasphemous Cumhal, that honour you pay to the sun, through ignorance of the omnipotent king, is no more perfect than if you worshipped your shield." The Milligans, in their learned story of the Irish under the Druids, say they worshipped the sun as their principal deity and the moon as their second deity, like the Phoenicians. Donald Ross, Scotch Inspector of Schools, writes in a similar way of his ancient northern kindred. The noblest strains in all Gaelic literature are in praise of the sun, and which is also represented as the ultimately inexplicable factor in the universe. In the sun, the Gaels found the two highest attributes of divinity, power and purity. There is a remarkable passage from St. Patrick's Confession which refers to this being tempted by Satan in a dream. It was suggested to me in the spirit that I should invoke Helia, Elias, or Eli, and meanwhile I saw the sun rising in the heaven. And while I was calling out Helia with all my might, behold, the splendour of that sun fell upon me, and immediately struck from me the oppressive weight. Probus had this version of the event. When he had thrice invoked the true sun, immediately the sun rose upon him. The language of the country has much associated with sun adoration. The mythical Simon Brick of Irish history may be Samen, the sun. Waterford was Cuan na Gruoth, the harbour of the sun. One Irish name for the sun is Krishna, of Eastern origin, but the Welsh Hu Gadarn, the sun, was Finn Mac Hwal in Erse. Finn Mac Hall in Erse. Grian, Grain, Grainan, Grainham have relations to the sun. The hill Grainan Cowrie is a sunny spot. The word Grange is from Grian. There is a Grainor in Wexford Bay. The Grange near Drogheda is a huge cone of stones piled in the honour of the sun. Green of Ossory was formerly Grain Erb. As Grain, the word occurs in a feminine form. The beautiful story of Dermot or Dermot and Grain is clearly a solar myth. The runaway pair were pursued by the irate husband, Finn MacCool, for a whole year. The lovers changing their resting place every night. One bard sings of Dermot with a fiery face. The last Danann sovereign was Mac Green. The cromlech on a hill of Kilkenny is known as the Slay Grean, Hill of the Sun. The women's quarter of the dwelling was the Greenan, so called from its brightness. The cromlech at Castle Mary near Cloyne is Carrag Croath, Rock of the Sun. General Valency traces some appellations for the sun to Chaldaic or Sanskrit. The Celts of Brittany borrowed their soul from sun, from the Roman sol. Caer Sedi was an Irish cycle. Bel is also the sun in Irish, as in Eastern lands. Beli was their god of fire. Beltane were wells sacred to the sun. The Irish vernal equinox was Eich Bal Tin, the night of Baal's fire. The sun's circuit was Beltane, or Bel's ring. This is where Beltane comes from, the ancient fire festival here in Scotland. The cycle of the sun on an anniversary was Enoch, pronounced Enoch, and it's singular that we are told that the days of Enoch were 365 days. Easter, as is well known, is connected with sun worship. The Irish dancing Easter Sunday is thus alluded to in an old poem. But Dick, she dances in such a way, no sun upon an Easter day is half so fine a sight. People used to be out early on Easter Sunday to see the sun dance in honour of the resurrection. The sun and moon, according to the chronicles of St. Columba, were to be seen on an altar of glass in the temple of the Tuath de Danann in Tyrconnell. For centuries, an Irish oath was accompanied with a hand on forehead and eyes turned to the sun. The round mounds or rafts enclosing the round dwellings related to an early sun worship. The same may be said to the tradition that the Battle of Ventry between the Fenians and their foes lasted 366 days. Hecataeus mentions the Hyperboreans of an island north of Gaul worshipped the sun. Diodorus speaks of the island's idolatry, saying, "The citizens are given up to music, harping, and chanting in honor of the sun." In Walker's Bards, we read of the feast of Samhain, or the moon, in the temple of Teachta. Sorry about that, guys. Teachta. Right, the moon, says Monier Williams, the great Vedas authority, is but a form of the sun. The circular dance in honour of the sun was derived from the East. Lucian says it consisted of a dance imitating his god, the sun. The priests of Baal indulged in it. A Druid song has this account. Ruddy was a sea beach, while the circular revolution was performed by the attendants and the white bands in graceful extravagance. An ancient sculpture at Glendalough represents the long-haired Apollo, or sun, attended by his doves. These were the sun images in Erin. In 2 Chronicle 14:5, we read of Asa putting away out of all cities of Judah the high places and the images, or sun images, of the Revised Version. At the Lucade Lam Fada, or Festival of Love, from August the 1st to August the 16th, games were held in honour of the sun and the moon. Fosbroke alludes to the revolving with the sun as a superstition. At Innismore, or Church Island, in Sligo, in a rock near the door of the church, is a cavity called Our Lady's Bed, into which pregnant women going and turning thrice around with the repetition of certain prayers fancy that they would then not die in childbirth. A Scotch writer observes, "The hearty Celts of Ireland say, 'The top of the morning to you.' Are these expressions to be regarded as remnants of dawn worship? It may be so, for many similar traces of the worship of the sun and moon as givers of good fortune are still to be found." An ode to the sun in the Libar Breck is thus rendered by an Erse authority: "Anticipate my lays, O sun, thou mighty Lord of the 7 heavens, mighty Governor of the heaven, sole and general God of man, thou gracious, just, and supreme King, whose bright image constantly forces itself on my attention, to whom heroes pray in perils of war. All the world praises and adores thee, for thou art the only glorious and sovereign object of universal love. praise, and adoration. Similarly sang Orpheus of old, O sun, thou art the genial parent of nature, splendent with various hues, shedding streams of golden light. The Rig Veda, however, in one place calls the sun the most beautiful work of God, while another of the Hindu sacred books has this: Let us adore the supremacy of the divine sun, the Godhead. Well might Capella exclaim in his hymn to the sun, the whole world adores thee under a great number of different names. Ossian sang, When wilt thou rise in thy beauty, first of Erin's maids? Thy sleep is long in the tomb. The sun shall not come to thy bed and sing, Awake, Darthula, awake, thou first of the women. The voice of spring is abroad, the flowers shake their heads on the green hills, the woods wave their growing leaves. Retire, O sun, the daughter of Kola is asleep. She will not come forth in her beauty, she will not move in the steps of her loveliness. Crow, who observes, the sun was a chief deity with us as well as the Greeks, adds, I have long thought that the great moat of Granard was the site of a temple to the sun. The Reverend F. Lemon in 1811 spoke of an inscription upon a quartzose stone at Tory Hill, Kilkenny, in Old Irish characters, which he read, Sli Grean, Hill of the Sun. Within view of this hill, said he, towards the west, on the borders of Tipperary, rises the more elevated mountain of Slain a Man, from which its name was probably consecrated to the moon. When Martin was in the Hebrides, he came across observances reminding him of solar worship. In the island of Rona, said he, off Ness, one of the native Needs expresses his high esteem for my person by making a turn around about me, sunways, and at the same time blessing me and wishing me all happiness. Again, when they get into the island, Flannan, all of them uncover their heads and make a turn sunways round, thanking God for their safety. The Reverend McQueen mentions that every village in Skye had a rude stone called Grugach, or fair-haired, which represented the sun, and he declares that milk libations were poured into Gruach stones. Travellers have written of Hebridean boats going out to sea, having their heads rowed sunways, at first for fear of ill luck on the voyage. Quite recently, one observed the same thing done by Aberdeen fishermen who objected to turn their boat against the sun. In all myths, sun gods are very successful in their warlike enterprises during the summer, but frequently lose a battle in winter. In Egyptian paintings, the winter sun is represented with only a single hair on the head. This reminds one of Samson, a word derived from Shemesh, the sun, losing strength in the loss of hair. The shaving of the head, so as to leave a circular bare spot, is a very ancient practice and was done in honour of the sun by certain priests of Jupiter and other deities. Mahomet forbade the idolatrous habits of his Arab disciples. That Mahomet, that's Muhammad, Mahomet forbade that's Muhammad, forbade the idolatrous habit of his Arab disciples. Rees calls the tonsure in Britain and Ireland merely a druidical survival. While the image of the sun was, down to the Great Revolution, carried in the priestly processions of Brittany, while Christians now, as Peruvians used to do formerly, stand the plate image of the sun upon the altar, and while we, though aesthetically honour the sunflower, we cannot too rudely condemn the ancient Irish for their reverent bowing to the material author of all earthly life. Right, guys, that's another hour, I think. That was a quick one. Oh, that was a quick hour. Well, right, anyway, that's the end of that reading session, and I will continue it possibly tomorrow. The next chapter is Fire Worship. We'll have a look at the next few chapters for the next reading. Next one's fire worship, Beltane, stone worship, single stones, stone circles, Logan stones, dolmens. So we could have another 2 or 3 readings here. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining me. And I hope you all have a great rest of the week. See you later. Cheers.